Linus Ullmark has been traded to the Ottawa Senators, and I have some serious questions about the return Don Sweeney was able to bring in for the Boston Bruins.
You're Locked On Bruins, your daily podcast on the Boston Bruins. Part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day.
What is up, Bruins fans, and welcome back to the Locked On Boston Bruins podcast. I'm your host, Ian McLaren, and this is a daily show where we discuss all things Spoked B. Today is Tuesday, June 25th, and I want to thank you so much for making Locked On Bruins part of your daily routine. Free and available on your favorite podcast app and on YouTube, part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day. And today's episode is brought to you by FanDuel. As the playoffs have wound down, the sports have stopped sportsing a bit like we want them to, but this summer, FanDuel is hooking up all customers with a boost or a bonus daily. That's right, there's something for everyone every day, all summer long. Visit FanDuel.com/lockedon to get started. Before we get started, a quick reminder, you can find the podcast on social media at Locked NHL Bruins, and you can find me, my hockey thoughts and dad jokes at Ian C. McLaren. Last night was Game 7 of the Stanley Cup Final, won by the Florida Panthers. And like 30 minutes before puck drop, the news broke that Linus Ullmark had indeed been traded to the Ottawa Senators. There was days, weeks of speculation that this was a possibility, probability, a likelihood, and it finally came to fruition. I was sitting at my kids' soccer game, kind of scrolling, wondering what the return would be, and as I was walking back to the parking lot, it popped up on my phone that the Boston Bruins received a 2024 first-round draft pick, 25th overall. This is the pick that originally belonged to the Boston Bruins. It was sent to Detroit in the Tyler Bertuzzi trade. It was top 10 protected. That condition was not met. That pick was traded to the Ottawa Senators last offseason for the rights to Alex DeBrincat, and now it finds its way home to the Boston Bruins, 25th overall. Along with that pick comes forward Mark Kastelic and goaltender Joonas Korpisalo. Ottawa, however, is retaining 25% of Korpisalo's salary, which amounts to $1 million against the cap. Now, here are my thoughts on this return. I think Ullmark for the 25th pick is very reasonable. On the other hand, you see the Ottawa Senators signed Korpisalo to a 5-year, $20 million contract last offseason that they quickly wanted to get out from under because Korpisalo did not have a great first season in Ottawa. I can see it being reasonable to sweeten the pot for taking on that contract with a late first-round pick. But adding it all together, it doesn't really add up to me. Why are the Bruins taking on Korpisalo's contract? Why are they bailing out the Ottawa Senators in this way? They are now on the hook for 4 more seasons of Korpisalo's services for a cap hit of $3 million per season. In my mind, the whole point of a Linus Ullmark trade was to free up some additional cap space. And so my assessment was, okay, maybe they get the 25th overall pick, an additional $5 million in cap space that they can spend on July 1st. Now, however, they get the 25th overall pick. Fine, dandy. That was the goal for the Bruins, is to get back into the first round. And that's what they have done. They now have their first round pick back. They have their first round pick next year, the year after. They still don't have a second or a third this year. But they're back in the first round, 25th overall pick. A selection spot that has been successful for them in the past. Just look at David Pastrnak. But they took on $3 million in salary for Korpisalo, and then Kastelic is against the cap at $835,000. So they really only freed up like $1 million plus. In my mind, the whole idea was to, okay, we have this position of strength. We have Jeremy Swayman, Linus Ullmark. We subtract Ullmark. Maybe you're not going to get the best return. Obviously, Jacob Chikrin and a first-round pick was a bit of a pipe dream. But at least you were opening up that cap space. At least you were getting an additional $5 million that you could spend in free agency come Monday, July 1st. Now, you've not only subtracted a Vezina Trophy winning goaltender and a very loved player in the locker room and among the fan base, but you've brought in a goalie who's worse, let's be honest, and a depth center of which you already have many. You have Jesper Boqvist as an RFA. You have Matt Poitras coming in. You have John Beecher who's emerged. Like, you have a bunch of guys who can play in your bottom six already. The biggest need is a top six center, a number one center. You could have used that $5 million to attract one or sign one on the open market and fill some needs elsewhere. Like that $5 million, you look at Jeremy Swayman's contract last season, and you can basically add like $4 million of that to get to where his new contract is going to be. But now you still have to re-sign Swayman. You've got $3 million dedicated to Korpisalo for the time being, at least. We'll discuss that a bit more, what their options could be. But that's a heavy price to pay to add a first-round pick, subtracting Ullmark, taking on this contract, and adding a bottom six forward who may or may not crack the opening night lineup. So I have every reason, and Bruins fans have every reason to be underwhelmed with this deal, to question what Don Sweeney was thinking. He didn't really address it quite yet. He's expected to speak to the media on Thursday prior to the NHL draft. But unless they have a plan with Korpisalo to perhaps flip him or buy him out, yeah, I love having that first round pick. I talked last week about a couple guys that I would love the Bruins to take with that selection. Jet Luchenko, Sasha Boisvert. But I'm really sad to see Linus go, and at that return, I'm not quite feeling it. And we'll discuss more what the return actually looks like here. Who are these guys? We'll discuss that as the podcast continues. The NHL playoffs have come to an end, as have the NBA playoffs. We're deep into the dog days of summer. Now, I love sports. I love them so much. I never want them to stop, but we're getting fewer games. It's pretty much baseball, WNBA, some other sports going on. They're not sportsing like we want them to, but FanDuel lets you keep the sports going whenever you want. All you have to do is open their app and dream up bets anytime you're in the mood. And this summer, FanDuel is hooking up all customers with a boost or bonus daily. That's right, there's something for everyone every day all summer long. Head over to FanDuel.com/lockedon to start making the most out of your summer. FanDuel is the official sports betting partner of Major League Baseball. Open up the app, check out the over-under for today's Red Sox Toronto Blue Jays game by heading to FanDuel.com/lockedon. Get daily boosts and bonuses with FanDuel, the official sports betting partner of Major League Baseball. Thank you so much once again for making Locked On Bruins part of your daily routine, free and available on your favorite podcast app and on YouTube. While you're over on YouTube, check out Locked On Sports Today, all the latest news, analysis, opinions from across the Locked On universe, free on YouTube and the Amazon Fire TV channels app. I'm sure there will be some portion of Locked On Florida Panthers. Our boy Armando Velez over there celebrating their Stanley Cup championship last night. Before that game, the Bruins pulled off this deal, sending Linus Ullmark to the Ottawa Senators for first-round pick, Joonas Korpisalo at 75% salary, and Mark Kastelic. Kastelic is a 25-year-old. He was originally drafted by Ottawa in the 5th round of the 2019 NHL entry draft. He did chip in 5 points, 5 assists in 63 games for the Senators last season, but he's a big body who can rack up the hits for sure. 6'4", 226-pound forward, 144 NHL games, all with the Senators, 14 goals, 11 assists in those games. But among Ottawa forwards, last season he ranked 4th in hits with 126 and racked up 63 penalty minutes. So he's a big body. He's a guy that could jump into the Bruins' 4th line and be effective in that role. The Bruins have, like I mentioned, a bunch of options for the 4th line already. Beecher, hopefully our boy Jesper Boqvist is re-signed. I'd like to see that. Maybe this signals Patrick Maroon won't be back. But they have options in the bottom 6 in terms of centers, especially if you are going to be adding a top center, say Elias Lindholm, that would bump down Zacha, Coyle. So where does this guy fit in? That's yet to be determined. His cap hit is $835,000. Now, the bigger piece that they're taking on is Joonas Korpisalo, who is 30 years old. He appeared in 55 games with Ottawa last season. They had signed him to this 5-year deal in the hopes that he would pair with Anton Forsberg and become a pretty decent goalie tandem. What happened was they ended up being the worst goalie tandem in the NHL. I know this personally. I had selected Korpisalo in my keeper fantasy league, hoping that he would secure the net at a pretty reasonable cap hit, but I ended up dropping him because he was pretty bad. 3.27 goals against average, 890 save percentage in 55 games with the Senators last season. Not great at all. And again, there's questions as to what the Bruins have planned for Korpisalo. Do they actually plan on keeping him and having him serve as the backup to Jeremy Swayman, who's due a new contract? Will they buy him out? That would affect their cap for some years to come. Do they try to flip him? Ideally, you would flip him for perhaps a second, probably a stretch, but maybe to get into the 3rd round or later. He has shown flashes of being okay. He was drafted 62nd overall in the 2012 NHL entry draft. He has a career save percentage of .901. And he was acquired by the Los Angeles Kings last season from the Columbus Blue Jackets with a view to helping shore up their goaltending for the playoffs. And he played pretty well for them, 7-3-1 with a .921 save percentage in 11 games. And that's nothing to sneeze at. And perhaps the Bruins have in mind to have goalie Bob Essensa, who has had a great track record with this organization, getting the most out of his goaltenders. Maybe they believe he can work his magic and turn Korpisalo into not just a serviceable backup, but a viable 1B option to Swayman. Even with Columbus, before he was traded last season, he had a .913 save percentage. With Columbus, it's a pretty bad team. Prior to that, though, .877, .894. He did have a .911 save percentage back in 2019-20. Very up and down, but played with a pretty bad Columbus team the last couple of years, and then Ottawa really did not meet expectations this past season, but that's largely due to their woeful goaltending. So again, the first round pick, that's a win for Don Sweeney. That's great to get back in the first round. They have not had a first round pick in a couple years. And we all know that their pipeline is pretty thin, and they could use some top prospects to really replenish that. What they'll get at 25, who knows? Please just take the best available player. Probably they're looking at shoring up the center position. Again, I'd love Jet Luchenko, teammate of Matt Poitras in Guelph. That would be a great pick. Sacha Valliere. We'll assess that as the week goes on and we get closer to the draft. Of course, Fabian Lysell was picked in 2021. He's yet to make the jump to the NHL level. Prior to that, you had John Beecher, who was drafted 30th overall in 2019. 2 selections ahead of Shane Pinto, who the Bruins appeared to covet in this trade. And that's one thing to keep in mind when assessing the return. It's been reported by Elliot Friedman on Hockey Night in Canada last night that Ullmark is intent on playing out this year and assessing his options at the end of 2024-25. If there was an agreement in principle to extend in Ottawa for Ullmark, that probably would have raised the return for the Bruins. But it's basically, on paper at least, a 1-year rental situation for the Senators, therefore diminishing the return for Boston. They got the first round pick. They have to take on Korpisalo, and they're on the hook for dealing with Ottawa's mess. They get that depth forward. Still, for me, not quite enough. And I would have liked to have seen something more. Not even that. It's not that I would have liked to have seen something more. It's that they weren't able to maximize the cap space that's being subtracted. Even if the return was just the first round pick, at least they would have freed up that $5 million in cap space. As it stands, they've only freed up like $1.165 million, which, I don't know. It's really underwhelming at the moment, pending what they think they can do with Korpisalo and what they're able to do in free agency. But it would have been nice to have more cap space to work with. So that's my take on the return. Coming up here as the podcast continues, we're going to quickly discuss Linus Ullmark's legacy as a member of the Boston Bruins. So at the end of the day, Linus Ullmark played 3 seasons for the Boston Bruins, appeared in 130 regular season games, and posted a record of 88, 26, and 10 with a .924 save percentage. He won the Vezina Trophy in 2023. He won the Jennings Trophy along with Jeremy Swayman as the top goaltending tandem in the NHL. He finished 10th in Hart voting last season as well, was an all-star, and played as good as any Bruins goalie has in the regular season in quite some time. Just an unbelievable partner for Jeremy Swayman, who, of course, has really come into his own over the past few years as well. And his trajectory, his development, certainly influenced and affected by his relationship with Linus Ullmark. And that's one of the reasons why Ullmark was deemed as expendable, because of the emergence of Jeremy Swayman. But make no mistake, Linus Ullmark was instrumental in that because of his mentorship, his relationship, and just pushing each other as well. It took Ullmark some time to get acclimated in Boston. I remember him saying it was like a full season. He didn't really feel at home until the first off season. And then, of course, he went out and backstopped the Bruins to the best regular season in NHL history. He fell off a little bit this season, but still a .915 save percentage, 22-10-7 record. He is turning 31 at the end of July, and perhaps there's some notion that the Bruins got the best seasons of his career. Who knows if he'll be able to sustain it in Ottawa, but there's every reason to believe he will be incredibly motivated for a bit of a revenge tour with Boston, jettisoning him to Ottawa. We will, of course, remember the goalie hugs. That has been, as much as people get sentimental about it, or as much as people overplay it and say, come on, get over it, it's silly, whatever. I personally loved seeing Swayman and Ullmark do that hug after every win. It was something I looked forward to watching. It put an exclamation point on each Boston Bruins win, and it really symbolized what is most important when it comes to this game that we love. It is a game, but it really kind of is all about the relationships formed along the way. These guys, it's a grind for these hockey players. And to have that special connection is not something to be taken for granted. Even Matthew Tkachuk said that after winning Game 7 of the Stanley Cup Final last night. He was asked what he's going to remember most about this run. He said, the plane rides, the meals between games, just the bonds that were formed through going through the fire with your teammates. And goaltenders are a special breed. They have special relationships. Sometimes the backup starter can be, really competitive, and guys might resent not playing. But these two had a special bond, and it was seen very, not nightly, but very often in the form of that goalie hug. And I'm going to miss seeing that. Who knows if it'll continue with Korpisalo or Brandon Bussi. We haven't touched on the fact that Bussi signed a 1-year, 2-way deal prior to this trade happening, and he's no longer waiver exempt. Maybe we'll touch on that in tomorrow's episode as we continue to break down this trade and what the goaltending situation looks like for the Bruins. But I feel for Ullmark having to move on. Don Sweeney, all he has said so far was a statement released through the team's social media. He said the Boston Bruins would like to thank Linus, Moa, Harry, and Lily for their contributions to the Bruins family. Linus is a Vezina winning goalie who was a star on and off the ice. We want to wish Linus and his family much success and happiness as he continues his career in Ottawa. So what is his legacy in Boston? Well, his regular season performances were really unmatched, and he played so great for the Bruins in tandem with Jeremy Swayman. The relationship they formed, the hugs, his influence, his impact, really treating Ullmark and Swayman, you can count them as brothers, the way that Swayman was ingratiated into Ullmark's family. But we can't not mention his playoff performances, right? He had that .924 save percentage for the Bruins in the regular season. In the playoffs, .887. He was really given one solid run in the series last year against the Florida Panthers. He went 3-3 with an .896 save percentage and was replaced in Game 7 by Swayman. Swayman took that mantle this playoffs and ran with it. He was fantastic. Ullmark only appeared in 2 games, and he had an .886 save percentage. Not really fair to judge his performance in this year's playoffs because he didn't really get a chance to get into the swing of things. But again, in that series against the Panthers, when they needed him to come through, it didn't happen. And ultimately, all that regular season success did not translate to anything tangible for the Bruins in the playoffs during the Swayman Ullmark years. So maybe Ullmark can go to Ottawa, turn them into a playoff team. We do wish him all the best there. I think he will enjoy his time there. It's a great city. I grew up there. Swedes have thrived there. Think of Daniel Alfredsson, Erik Karlsson. I think it could be a good fit. But the fact that he was not willing to entertain an extension at the moment really diminished the return for the Bruins. I'm glad they'll be in the draft. I'm glad that we'll have something to focus on Friday night as the draft will take place in Vegas. Would have liked to have seen them come out with some more cap flexibility, at least from this trade. Perhaps that will happen tomorrow. We can discuss more the goaltending situation, what a Korpisalo buyout might look like, if there's any trade options, Bussy not being waiver exempt, what that all means. We'll break that down tomorrow. But for today, underwhelmed by the return. Happy to have that first round pick, but kind of bewildered, flummoxed about taking on Korpisalo. And yeah, that's pretty much it. The return is what it is, and largely based on, well, he's 31 years old, or will be when the season starts. 1 year left on his contract. And if you look at, like we did last week, trades involving goaltenders, a first doesn't happen very often, but to have to take on Korpisalo too is a bit of a, I don't know. We'll talk about that even more tomorrow. But thank you, Linus, for everything you did in black and gold. We'll never forget that Vezina season and the impact that you had on Jeremy Swayman, on us, the fans. Long live the goalie hug. We'll see if it continues in Ottawa, here in Boston. Wish we could have had more playoff success with Ullmark, but alas, it's a team sport, and the Bruins not able to get past this year's Stanley Cup champions in the Florida Panthers. All right, that's it for today's episode. My friends, thank you so much for taking some time to check it out. Please do take care of yourselves, take care of each other, and we'll be back tomorrow on a brand new episode of Locked On Boston Bruins, part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your favorite team every single day.